how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jeff. Today, I want to talk a little bit about some of my Star Trek books. Now, unlike a lot of other booktubers or YouTubers out there, I don't own any Star Trek fiction books. I do want to get the James Blish kind of adaptation or kind of short story version of each of the episodes of the original series of Star Trek at some point. But I don't have any of them now. I don't have, Spock Must Die or any of the other Timescape Trek books or anything like that. And I'll get a few down the road at some point. I'm not really so huge on reading kind of spin-off books. I guess I do like some of the TV tie-ins for other shows, like the Man from U.N.C.L.E. ones are pretty cool, or they're kind of more novelties than anything. But for me, the Star Trek that I'm interested in is mostly the original series with some of the later series that came in the Rick Berman era, like the Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I don't really care for Voyager much. It's okay. Compared to the new Trek series, for the most part, Voyager is great. Don't get me wrong. But in my personal, ranking of Star Trek series, I know Voyager has a lot of fans. I'm not particularly one of them. It's okay. And Enterprise is better for me, but again, not up to with the original series. I've been interested in the original Star Trek series for a long time. I'm not a, rabid Trekker or Trekkie Star Trek fan, but I do like Star Trek quite a bit, and I've watched the original series and some of the other spin-offs quite a lot through my life. In my recent solo live stream I did, a little over a week ago, I went through my TV on Blu-ray sets, and I, of course, had the original series, all 3 of those seasons on Blu-ray with remastered effects. Those are great. I also have 4 of the 7 Next Generation seasons on Blu-ray. So those are the only 2 that have been remastered for high definition. I wish Deep Space Nine would be, but as it turned out from the scuttlebutt behind the scenes, a lot of the later seasons of the Next Generation didn't sell quite to Paramount's expectations, and it was very, very expensive to remaster those. Go back and kind of not update. They didn't do updated effects for Next Generation, but they had to, rescan everything, and it was a very expensive process, and they didn't quite get all their money back, I think. So I think eventually they probably did with sales to Netflix and other, rental fees and licensing, etc., to other streaming services and the like, but it wasn't financially viable enough for them to tackle the redheaded stepchild of the Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine, which many fans really love, but that would take a lot of money to fix that one up, and just hasn't happened yet. It may at some point. I never say never, but probably not likely. Anyway, all that is a little preamble to my kind of fandom or liking of those shows, and I've collected a few making of or surveys of the various TV series books over time, and I just want to show those off real quick in this video. So there are many, many books written about the original series, and I have a really nice set of 3 volumes to show you later about that. One of the earliest breakdown of each episode kind of books was this one, the Star Trek Compendium. This is a pocket books edition by Alan Asherman, and this just has black and white photos, but it goes through and gives the star date for those who are nerdy enough about those things, and the writer, director, the principal cast, guest stars, the star date, and the synopsis, plot synopsis of the episode, and then usually a couple pages of, covering the making of the episode and behind the scenes with some quotes from various people. Mostly it's just factual information about the episode. And you'll see the pocketbooks logo right there on the bottom there. can see little pocket books, little kangaroo. They're kind of, large size trade paperbacks. You can see what I paid for this one used, $6.75 back in the day. I believe this one came out in 1986. They go up through the search for Spock, for example, with some, again, making of information, etc. I got this mostly for the TV series, which is, of course, broken up into seasons and has some nice promo photos and things, even though they're all in black and white. It also has the Star Trek, and it covers the episodes of the Star Trek animated series. The cool thing about the animated series, it was a Filmation series, and every one of the original cast except Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov, came back. And a lot of the guest characters were voiced by James Doohan, the guy who plays Scotty. He did a lot of computer voices and guest star voices. And I think also Majel Barrett, who played Nurse Chapel. She was Gene Roddenberry's wife. I think she did some other female voices in the animated series. Anyway, it's a pretty good series too. And it's kind of special to original Star Trek fans because it has the voices of the original cast. Now, not all of them are great, but it was a Saturday morning cartoon, but there are pretty cool stories in some of those. Those who love, I'm not going to talk a lot about the original series. If you know it, you love it, or not. I guess some people think it's old and dated, and it is, but to me, it's always going to be the best set of characters and the best stories and the best, most exciting of the Star Trek series. But I do like the other ones. Now, I don't have it here with me, but I do have it at home, and that's the Next Generation Companion. And that was published in 1992 with some later editions put out in 1995 and beyond. And that was written by Larry Nemecek. I'm guessing it's Nemecek. It could be Nemecek. Probably Nemecek. And I have that one in my collection back in storage in the United States. I don't have it here with me. Again, it's a similar layout, though. It's another pocket books, and it has a picture of the Next Generation crew on the front, and it goes through. It's a thicker, of course, because instead of 3 seasons like in the original series, the Next Generation had 7, so a lot more material in that book. But it follows a similar format where it gives the episode title for each season. It gives a little overview of what's going on in each season, then episode by episode breakdown with a little plot synopsis and some behind the scenes making of, etc. Now, a lot of people these days might think that these kinds of books are kind of passé because you can just go on Wikipedia or on IMDb online and get lots of information about the plot, a synopsis, and the cast of each episode, etc. But these do provide some really good information about the, behind the scenes making of and some the writing and the conception of the episodes, etc. It's not in super detail, but it's very interesting. Even more detailed was this one. This is Star Trek, the Deep Space Nine Companion. So instead of the Compendium, they changed to the Companions. Now you'll see the little yen sticker up here. In my video I did about kind of bookstores in Japan, and I talked about the bookstore chain Book Off, kind of used bookstore chain. It has also, CDs and albums and things like that. But the Book Off, I got this from years ago and back in the early days in Japan, probably 2006 or something, maybe 20 years ago. Shortly after this came out, which was, again, another pocket books edition from the year 2000. And the author of this one is Terry J. Erdman with Paula M. Block, I guess, assisting. Anyway, if you'll see here, you'll see the 300 yen sticker. So I got this for, less than $2 probably in the exchange, if you factor in the exchange rate. And I saw this sitting in a bin outside the Book Off, and it was in pretty good shape, a little dinged here and there. It's quite a heavy, floppy trade paperback. Now, this one has got a lot of stuff in it, including on one of the end papers, or, one of the frontispiece or whatever. It has the map of Bajor, I guess, for those who know Deep Space Nine. It's a space station orbiting the planet Bajor, and it was formerly a Cardassian, kind of a enemy alien kind of invader or occupation force of Bajor, and they had built that station and were running it, and then when they were forced out, the Federation came in and kind of took over and kind of ran it as a neutral sort of territory. Anyway, it's an interesting series, and it has a introduction and some, again, background information about much more detailed than the previous volumes, I think, about the making of the show. And it has lots of, kind of conceptual art as well as black and white photos of the, from the stories, etc. But it's, it's put together in pretty much a similar way, conceptual art, drawings, and for props and sets and things like that. But if you see, for example, episode 517, which I guess would be season 5, number 17, I'm guessing, Ties of Blood and Water, we have similar thing. It's the episode, the teleplay and story and directed by, and the cast, star date, and the plot, much more detailed plot synopsis, and compared to the original Star Trek Compendium, quite a few extra, at least like 3 pages of description of the making of and the kind of breakdown of the story and what this writer thinks are the high points or low points. We have a whole little kind of a side piece on the last day on the set at the conclusion of the 7th season, when 1999 in April, when the show was ending, and kind of talking about a little kind of speech probably by Ira Behr. Ira Behr was the showrunner for most of this. And again, Deep Space Nine was kind of treated like the redheaded stepchild a lot of the Star Trek series. This was, it started at the tail end of Next Generation. There was a little overlap there. And then it finished while Voyager, the next series after Deep Space Nine, had started. So a lot of times the people making Deep Space Nine kind of felt like they were, on the periphery, no one really giving them much credit, but they were the first Trek series to really go into some serialized storytelling and season-long arcs and things like that towards the end of the show. Anyway, cool show and a pretty cool, making of book. I'm going to talk briefly about some books by Mark A. Altman and Edward Gross. Now, Mark A. Altman ran for a couple of years, I think it ran for, in the 90s, a science fiction TV and movie magazine called Sci-Fi Universe. He did that with Robert Meyer Burnett, and that was a very cool magazine. And they also made a film together called Free Enterprise, kind of an independent film, which starred William Shatner as himself, kind of befriending the 2 male leads who were trying to make it in Hollywood, and it was about their kind of love life and professional life, and William Shatner, who was a hero to those writers and co-directors, also plays himself and shows that he, giving out advice as well as showing that, some kind of vulnerable side. It's a very fun movie, and they went on to do several books about Star Wars as well, and they still run a podcast and things like that. But Edward Gross and Mark A. Altman did this one in 1998 that came out with Trek Navigator. Now, what this is, as it says here, every Trek episode rated and reviewed by America's leading Treksperts, the ultimate guide to the entire Star Trek, the entire Trek saga. Okay? And how this one breaks down is basically, it says the name of the episode, and then you'll have a little kind of code or little, it'll say VOY for Voyager, or TOS for the original series, or TNG, or DS9, or TAS for the animated series. And each of the 2 guys gives their personal critique, like a capsule review of each episode. So what they do is they'll have the episode, for example, Relics. This is the Star Trek Next Generation episode where James Doohan returns as Scotty. They find him floating in a shuttlecraft and bring him on board, and how he reflects upon, he's been in some kind of space anomaly, and it's hundreds of years after he was serving on the crew, etc. So again, they have the title of the episode, the code of the series it's on, 3-letter code, TNG, original air date, who it was written by, who directed it, and then they give a little brief, short few sentences as a synopsis of the plot, and then they give their reviews, right? So Altman gives it 3.5, and Gross gives it also a 3.5, right? In the capable hands of Ron Moore, the resurrection of Scotty is so skillfully performed that it's easy to overlook the hokiness of his return. So, and then they go on to say what they like or didn't like about an episode. Now, the only problem with this book, I guess, is its incompleteness, because when it was released, at the time it was released, they only were able to cover the first 2 seasons of Voyager and maybe the first episode of the 3rd season. That's all that's in there. And, obviously, Voyager went on for 5 more seasons for a total of 7 seasons. There's 5 seasons of Enterprise. They haven't, as far as I'm aware, gone back to redo this one, expand this one. They probably should. Almost 2 decades later, they came up with a oral history series of Star Trek as a 2-book series, the 50-Year Mission, because that was, I guess, the 50th, when it came out around the 50th anniversary of the original Star Trek. And these have very unwieldy titles. They're unauthorized, but they're quite interesting. They're not, set up in a clear way. They're kind of done. They're an oral history. So they talk to dozens of behind the scenes crew and the cast and directors and writers and producers of the various Star Trek series up to and including Enterprise and the first J.J. Abrams movie, I believe, as well, for the 2nd volume. And, they just kind of go through the warts and all, making of, sniping, gossipy, airing the feuds between the actors and writers and producers and all that. All of that is being spoken out frankly, and they just transcribed it down and kind of put it in I'm sure it was a lot of work to kind of put it in order, so it kind of tells the story of the making of the shows. Pretty interesting. I have these on Kindle versions. I don't have them in hardback book versions. The first one is The 50-Year Mission, the complete, uncensored, unauthorized oral history of Star Trek, the first 25 years. How's that for an unwieldy title? And then the second one, so the first one only covers the original series, which of course is the most famous, probably arguably the most well-loved, although you could make a case for the next generation, perhaps for a different generation of fans being as or more popular. But I think that, time has shown that the original series is the one that really is sticking in people's minds the most. And the second volume covers everything from the next generation on, so up to probably the very first Star Trek movie by Abrams. We have the second one is The 50-Year Mission, the next 25 years from the next generation to J.J. Abrams. Again, the complete, uncensored, unauthorized oral history of Star Trek, the second 25 years. Again, really long, cumbersome title. But again, they're quite interesting. I didn't see the need to get physical books of those. I was happy just to have them on my Kindle, on my ebook form. And I've read through, not front to back those, but I've read through several sections. Now, the real humdinger, the one that really goes into massive detail in their great collection of making of books and episode coverage, and we're not just talking a couple pages per episode, we're talking, several pages per each episode. And that is the These Are the Voyages editions by Mark Cushman. Now, Mark Cushman had help from Susan Osborne. And this first one has a foreword by John D.F. Black and Mary Black. John D.F. Black wrote some of the early episodes in season 1. As you'll see here, it's the expanded and revised edition, the very first one, season 1. So there are 3 of these. They're big, heavy trade paperbacks. And here's Mark Cushman. He got a hold of several boxes of correspondence between what do you call it? Line producer, assistant producer, Robert Justman, who was kind of in charge of the day-to-day technical running of the show, the original series, and of course Gene Roddenberry and Paramount and a bunch of different people. And he was able to pull from those and kind of make a picture of how Star Trek was put together, and it was a real fight to get that show made. It's pretty incredible it actually got those 3 seasons out on air. And this one, as you'll see, it is plenty text heavy, and I have read most of this first one from front to back. Some short biographies of the main participants. Of course, that's Gene Roddenberry, and talking about some of Roddenberry's early show, The Lieutenant, which only ran 1 season, starring Gary Lockwood, who you might remember as one of the astronauts in 2001. That's a pretty good show. I have that on DVD to boldly pitch. So before we even get to the first episode, we have all sorts of, we have 70 plus pages on the casting and how they, the DC Fontana and all the writers, Stanley G. Robertson and DeForest Kelley, and talking about DeForest Kelley, who played Bones, his extensive background as a supporting actor on Westerns and all sorts of things, the kind of layout of the bridge there, or ship's corridors, I should say, and, budgeting information, etc. So talking about the different pilots, but to give you kind of an idea of the usual breakdown of episodes and how this book is put together, just to show you how detailed they are. It's really something else. Here's the second episode, the Corbomite maneuver. The Corbomite maneuver. Say that 3 times fast. That's the one that ends up with the little, very tense episode. And at the end, you see a little Clint Howard. Have some Tranya. The little guy who's the alien at the end. This one here. Ha 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 ha. Little tiny young Clint Howard. Cute little kid. Not such a cute adult, but cool guy. He was also in Gentle Ben. But it gives you an idea here. It shows, again, the episode name, title, and the director and writer and all that from the NBC press release, the kind of plot synopsis, and then his version of the plot synopsis. But has some sound bites, some quotes from, sorry, this book's a little heavy. It's hard for me to hold it straight for you. Some sound bites, meaning some quotes from the episode. Assessment, what he thinks of the episode, and then the story behind the story, the script timeline. He goes into such detail, pages after pages, with notes from that box of correspondence or boxes of correspondence that he had, pre-production, and again, different departments talking to each other, casting, including guest casting, and, production diary, how the episode was put together. And he interviewed just hundreds of people. I mean, almost every guest star in every episode, at least one of them, if they're still alive, especially the female guest stars, because most of them were more likely to survive than the male guest stars. He's still going on and on about how they put it together and getting the special effects together, which was a real problem in that first season especially. They were behind on a lot of things. And again, finishing up with release and reactions from the critics and some people writing in with mailbag and ratings information, which, the continued story for years of the original series was that it was canceled because no one was watching it, that the ratings weren't good, that it almost didn't come back for a 3rd season, except for the fan write-in campaign that was a kind of unprecedented, that made the studio go ahead, and NBC and Paramount to go ahead and give it another season, a final 3rd season. But actually, when you read these, is the ratings were not bad. There were only 3 networks at the time, and quite often Star Trek did pretty well. But, there were a lot of factors involved. Probably the number one thing was Gene Roddenberry's recalcitrance and continual fighting and pissing off the brass at NBC and Paramount, which probably ended the whole thing. Then you'll have some, the mailbag where people were writing in some of the choice letters about the episode. So just that one episode, started on page 130, and the coverage of it, the aftermath and memories about it. Finishes on page 150. So that's 20 pages with some images for one episode. Pretty incredible. And they talk about, how the series was going, the wrap, the prep. And then he has tons and tons and tons and tons of footnotes and, bibliography and sources, references that he's quoting, etc. So, we're looking at 640 or so pages for this one volume alone. Similar format for season 2. These Are the Voyages season 2. And again, it's set up in the exact same way. Again, with Susan Osborne helping him with probably collecting data and things and doing some writing on some parts, I'm sure. And this one has a foreword by Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov. Nuclear vessels captain, right? And then, table of contents, you'll see a second season and casting off season 2, and then all the episodes with little stops in the middle for enter the different writers, enter John Meredith Lucas, enter Jerome Bixby, enter David Gerald, mid-season 1967 for the record, etc. Also, what he often does is for each entry of each episode is Cushman will say what were some of the hit songs right at that time, at that week, and what were some of the hit movies and other hit TV shows. And he talks about a lot of other shows that were scheduled against Star Trek, and also the guest stars, the guest actors who, were appearing on the series and maybe other series they came from. All the rewriting of various things, little, kind of blurbs from various TV guides or other kind of TV newspaper coverage. In the famous one where the planet they land on is run by Nazis, and Kirk has to go undercover with Spock to deal with it. The making, plans on how to make various props and ships and things, and again, other media where it appeared, other periodicals. Again, just unbelievably detailed. I mean, this, if you're, again, you shouldn't have just one source, but if you want, there's some people that don't think that Cushman does the best job that he could. I happen to think these are excellent resources, even if, nobody's perfect. I'm sure he makes some mistakes. I know the first edition of season 1 had a lot of errors and typos, and so that's why the revised versions are better. But, this is about as detailed as you could ever want if you're a fan of the original series. And here's finally, These Are the Voyages season 3, and this one's clocking even more. This one has a foreword by David Gerald. This one's 736 pages all told, and again we have information about the cast. Each episode, again, getting in the third season was, of course, a very troubled production. The show was losing support at the network, and a lot of black and white photos. Again, none of these books have color photos, but the photos are nice and clear, well reproduced. Talking about some of of course, the series ended at this point, so talking about the James Blish short story adaptations of the episodes, and the Gold Key comics, and all of that jazz, and lots and lots and lots and lots of details. So we're looking at least 18 to 22, 25 pages per episode, with little interstitials talking about what's happening at the mid-season, which episodes were chosen for rerun, etc. Of course, everyone, or most everyone, who's a fan of original Star Trek knows that despite whatever had happened with its ratings during the original airings, where the show really exploded in popularity was in syndication. And then it became huge, and it led to the eventual motion picture, Star Trek the Motion Picture in 1979, which some people, myself included, sometimes referred to as the motionless picture. But it has its fans for sure, and I do like it. It's just not perfect. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. That is my small but meaty collection of Star Trek books, nonfiction books, talking about the making of the various series, especially the first 3, which are the ones I'm most interested in. I wouldn't bother probably to get a book about the making of Voyager. I'm sure there was a Voyager companion. There probably was an Enterprise companion too, because Trek fans are everywhere and they all want their kind of coverage of these books. These kinds of TV making of books, surveys, overviews, companions, whatever you want to call them, with the internet and lots of blogs and things, they're probably not so necessary anymore for fans, and so they're probably a rapidly decreasing in size niche. So there's fewer and fewer of them being put out. But it was a kind of cottage industry, I'd say, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s to have a lot of these TV books, making of books. I have quite a few about other series like Doctor Who, or like I've shown on the channel before, The Avengers, many different kinds of shows, Rockford Files, The Fugitive, etc., The Night Stalker Companion, which I had another video about. So this is basically what I have for Star Trek, and hope you found something interesting there. In the description below, I'll give a link to Mark at Richardson Reed's coverage of those These Are the Voyages original series books. He does a really good job going through those too. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, I highly recommend him. Thanks for watching as always. We'll see you in another video real soon. Take care.